I'll give you 500K if you operate on this. They laughed at her for being a woman and a surgeon until her heart started beating. Dr. Emily Johnson clenched her fists when she heard the laughter echoing through the operating room at Memorial General Hospital, one of the most prestigious in Chicago. At 28, she had just graduated as a cardiac surgeon, one of the few women to specialize in that male-dominated institution. The offer had come from Richard Thompson, a millionaire real estate developer who needed an extremely complex heart surgery. I'll give you $500,000 if you can operate on this, but I seriously doubt a woman is capable, he said, provoking laughter from the veteran doctors in the room. Emily felt her blood boil. It wasn't the first time she'd heard comments like this, but this time was different. She desperately needed that money. Her mother, Margaret Johnson, had run a small community clinic in the South Side, Chicago's South area, for 30 years. The clinic served underprivileged families in the region and was about to close its doors. The bank had given an ultimatum: 48 hours to pay off the $400,000 debt or lose everything. Mr. Thompson, Emily raised her voice, cutting through the laughter. I accept the challenge. The businessman looked at her with disdain. He was a robust, 55-year-old man, used to getting everything he wanted with money. His neatly combed gray hair and expensive suit contrasted with the hospital setting. You don't even know what this involves, he laughed again. It's a complex tetralogy of fallot correction with pulmonary atresia. Only 3 surgeons in the country master this technique. Emily swallowed hard. She knew the condition. It was an extremely rare and dangerous congenital heart defect, 4 simultaneous defects requiring a single high-precision surgery. One wrong move could be fatal for the patient. Dr. Robert Anderson, the hospital's head of cardiac surgery, watched the scene with interest. At 52, he was known for his arrogance and his belief that women lacked the temperament for cardiac surgery. He saw this as the perfect opportunity to prove his theory. Dr. Johnson, he approached with a sly smile. If you're so confident, I'll authorize the procedure, but of course following all safety protocols. Emily knew it was a trap, but she had no choice. The deadline to save her mother's clinic was running out. I accept the conditions, she replied firmly. Excellent, Dr. Anderson clapped. You'll have a week to prepare. And naturally, as required by the medical board for cases of this complexity, you'll operate under the direct supervision of a senior surgeon. Emily's heart sank. She knew exactly who would be chosen as her supervisor. Dr. Michael Carter, a 45-year-old man who had lost a promotion to her months earlier and had made a point of publicly humiliating her ever since. Dr. Carter will be your supervisor, Dr. Anderson confirmed, barely hiding his satisfaction. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, continuing. That same night, Emily drove her silver Honda Civic to the South Side. Her mother's clinic was in a converted house on Hope Street, right in the heart of the community. Even though it was Friday night, there was still activity. Several people waited to be seen. Margaret Johnson, at 54, was a petite woman with a commanding presence. She had raised Emily alone after her husband abandoned them when their daughter was just 5. She had worked as a nurse since she was 20 and always dreamed of having a place where she could help families in need. Emily, my daughter, Margaret hugged her as soon as she walked in. I'm so glad you came. I need to talk to you about something important. They headed to the small office at the back of the clinic. The walls were peeling and the equipment was old, but everything was impeccably clean and organized. Mom, I know about the bank. Emily held her mother's hands. I'll get the money. Margaret sighed deeply. Sweetheart, I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for this. I've already done so much good here. If it has to close, then so be it. Don't say that. Emily squeezed her mother's hands. This clinic is your life. It's the dream you built with your own hands. I'll save it. You can trust me. Emily didn't tell her mother about the surgery. She knew Margaret would worry too much. Instead, she spent the weekend studying everything about tetralogy of Fallot. She read articles, watched videos of similar surgeries, and searched for any information that could help her. On Monday morning, when she arrived at the hospital, Emily discovered something that would change everything. While reviewing Richard Thompson's medical records, She saw the emergency contact name, Lauren Thompson, daughter. The name made her stop breathing. Lauren had been her best friend throughout childhood and adolescence. They lived in the same neighborhood and were inseparable until they were 16, when Emily announced she wanted to study medicine. Lauren, influenced by her father, said that was a man's job and called Emily ridiculous. Their friendship ended there, painfully and permanently. For 12 years they hadn't spoken. Emily moved on, studied hard, got into medical school at a public university, and specialized in cardiac surgery. Lauren married a businessman at 20 and lived a life of luxury, always posting photos on social media of expensive trips and designer clothes. "Dr. Johnson," a voice snapped her out of her thoughts, "you need to see this." It was Dr. Brandon Wilson, a resident who always treated her with respect. He held some imaging scans. "What is it, Brandon?" "I was reviewing Mr. Thompson's tests and found something the other doctors missed." He pointed to a CT scan. "Look here, there's calcification in the right coronary artery. It's small, but it could complicate the surgery." Emily examined the images carefully. Brandon was right. There was indeed calcification that could cause serious problems during the procedure. It required a change in surgical strategy. "I'll take this to Dr. Anderson," Emily said. "Dr. Johnson," Brandon hesitated, "be careful. Everyone here knows they want you to fail." Emily nodded gratefully. She knew Brandon was risking his own career by warning her about their superior's intentions. In Dr. Anderson's office, Emily presented her findings. The chief of surgery barely glanced at the images. "Dr. Johnson, this is unnecessary alarmism," he said dismissively. "You're still too inexperienced to identify complications that senior doctors missed. I suggest you focus on the basics." "But doctor, the calcification is clearly visible here," Emily insisted, pointing to the scan. "Dr. Johnson," Dr. Anderson stood, clearly irritated. "Are you questioning the diagnosis of the doctors who examined this patient before you? Dr. Carter and I reviewed all the tests personally." Emily realized she was in an impossible position. If she insisted, she'd be seen as arrogant and insubordinate. If she stayed silent and something went wrong during the surgery, she'd be blamed for negligence. "Understood, doctor." She swallowed her pride. "I'll follow the established protocol." That afternoon, as she left the hospital, Emily was surprised by an elegant woman waiting for her in the parking lot. It took her a few seconds to recognize Lauren Thompson. Her old friend was thinner now, with well-styled blonde hair and expensive clothes, but her eyes were still the same. "Emily," Lauren approached hesitantly, "can we talk?" "Lauren," Emily felt a lump in her throat. "How did you know I work here?" "I saw your name on the list of doctors scheduled to operate on my father." Lauren looked down. "Emily, I need to ask you something. Walk away from this surgery." Emily stared at her, confused. "What do you mean, walk away?" "My father is very sick. This surgery is too risky. Lauren couldn't finish the sentence. "Please, Emily. I know the two of you got off on the wrong foot, but he's all I have." "Lauren, I'm a doctor. My duty is to try to save your father's life, no matter our personal differences." "But you don't understand." Lauren began to cry. "He's not the man he seems to be. My father is scared, Emily. Terrified. This bet of $500,000 is just his way of coping with the fear of going into surgery." Emily was bewildered. The Richard she had met seemed arrogant and confident, not someone filled with terror. "Lauren, I don't understand why you think I shouldn't do the surgery. I'm a skilled surgeon." "It's not that," Lauren wiped her tears. "It's, Emily, there's something you don't know. My father wrote a letter. If anything goes wrong during the surgery, he'll publicly blame it on women's incompetence in medicine. He'll destroy your career, Emily." Emily's world collapsed. She realized she was being set up as a scapegoat. If the surgery succeeded, it would just be beginner's luck. If it failed, it would prove women weren't cut out for cardiac surgery. "Why are you telling me this?" Emily asked. Lauren looked into her old friend's eyes. "Because even after all these years, I still remember the brave girl who dreamed of saving lives. And because I know you're doing this for the money. And I'm sure it's for a good cause." That night, Emily called her former mentor, Dr. Catherine Williams. Catherine had been the first woman to become head of cardiac surgery in the United States, but retired early at 55 after years of enduring humiliation and harassment in the medical field. "Emily, my dear." Catherine's warm voice brought some comfort. "How are you?" "Dr. Catherine, I need your advice. I'm in a very difficult situation." Emily explained everything: the complex surgery, the bet, the financial pressure to save her mother's clinic, what she'd learned from Lauren, the letter Richard had written. Catherine was silent for a long time before responding. "Emily, I've fought this kind of prejudice for 40 years. When I started, it was even worse. The men didn't even pretend to respect us. But you know what I learned? The best answer to prejudice is competence. If you believe you can save this man's life, then do it. Not for the money, not to prove anything to anyone, but because that's what doctors do. But what if I fail? What if they're right? Emily, you were my best student. I'm certain you correctly identified that calcification the others missed. Trust your medical instincts. And remember one thing, no matter what happens, you're already an exceptional surgeon. No one can take that away from you." After talking with Catherine, Emily felt more confident in her decision to move forward. She spent the next week preparing intensely, studying every detail of cardiac anatomy, reviewing surgical techniques, and even practicing movements on simulators. On Thursday, 2 days before the surgery, Emily received a call that sent her into a panic. "Emily, sweetheart," came Margaret's desperate voice. "The bank manager called. They're going to foreclose on the debt tomorrow if we don't pay. I'm going to lose everything, my dear." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility. "Mom, just hold on a little longer. I'll have the money on Saturday, I promise. Honey, I don't want you doing anything reckless for my sake." "It's not reckless, Mom. It's my job." On Friday morning, Emily arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. She wanted to go over every detail of the surgery one more time. When she entered the surgical center to check the equipment, she discovered something terrible. The specialized instruments she had requested for the surgery had been sabotaged. The blades were dull, the sutures had been cut, and some equipment showed defects that were clearly not accidental. Emily's legs trembled. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning, and without those specific instruments, it would be impossible to perform the procedure safely. "Problems, Dr. Johnson?" Dr. Carter's sarcastic voice startled her. He stood at the entrance of the surgical center, watching her discovery with a malicious smile. "Dr. Carter, the instruments are damaged." Emily tried to stay calm. "We need a new set." "What a shame." He stepped closer. "The instruments for this type of surgery are extremely specific. We don't have others in the hospital. And borrowing them from somewhere else on a Friday afternoon, well, I think it'll be impossible." Emily realized this had been planned. Dr. Carter wanted her to fail before she even began. "Doctor, this is deliberate sabotage." She stared at him. "You know that without these instruments, the surgery can't be performed safely." "Are you accusing me of something, Dr. Johnson?" He smiled coldly. "Because if you are, I hope you have proof. Accidents happen. Equipment fails. It's part of hospital life." Emily walked briskly out of the surgical center. She had less than 20 hours to find a solution. She started calling every hospital in Chicago, but as Dr. Carter had predicted, getting such specific instruments on a Friday afternoon was nearly impossible. That's when Nurse Sarah, one of the hospital's longest-serving employees, discreetly approached her. "Dr. Johnson," she whispered, "can I speak with you privately?" They went to an empty room. "Doctor, I know what they did to your instruments," Sarah said quietly. "I saw Dr. Carter tampering with them last night." Emily felt a mix of anger and gratitude. "Sarah, can you testify to that?" "Doctor, I have 3 kids to raise and I can't lose my job." Sarah looked down. "But I can help in another way." "How?" "I have a friend who works at University Medical Center. She can lend us the instruments, but they have to be returned by Monday." She hesitated. "It'll cost $2,000. That's the price for the equipment's preventive maintenance, sir." Emily didn't have $2,000 to spare, but she had no choice. She took out her credit card and made the payment through Sarah. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On Saturday morning, Emily arrived at the hospital at 5. The surgery was scheduled for 7. The borrowed instruments had arrived overnight, and she confirmed they were in perfect condition. At 6:30, Emily was preparing in the locker room when Lauren appeared. "Emily, I came to say goodbye to my dad." Lauren was visibly nervous. "He asked to speak with you before the surgery." In the room, Richard Thompson seemed much smaller than Emily remembered. Wearing the hospital gown and connected to various machines, he had lost all the arrogance he had shown just a week before. "Dr. Johnson," he said with difficulty, "I want to apologize for what I said last week. It wasn't right." Emily was surprised by the change in attitude. "Mr. Thompson, don't worry about that now. Focus on recovering." "Doctor," he held her hand, "I'm scared. Really scared. That letter I wrote, it was fear talking. I don't want my daughter to think I'm a coward." Emily looked at Lauren, who was silently crying in the corner of the room. "Mr. Thompson, fear is normal. Anyone in your place would feel the same. But I want you to know, I'll do everything in my power to make sure you come through this surgery well." "Doctor," he squeezed her hand tighter, "if anything goes wrong, I don't want anyone blaming you. The decision to have this surgery was mine." Emily felt her eyes well up. This terrified man was so different from the arrogant businessman she had met. At 7 sharp, Emily entered the operating room. The medical team was complete. Dr. Carter as supervisor, 2 residents, an anesthesiologist, and 4 nurses. There were also a few doctors observing through the glass, including Dr. Anderson. Richard was sedated, and the surgery began. Emily made the first incision with steady hands, trying to block out all negative thoughts and focus solely on the procedure. "Dr. Johnson," Dr. Carter interrupted her after just 10 minutes. "This incision is too small. For a case of this complexity, you need more access." Emily knew the size of the incision was correct, but didn't want to start a conflict so early. "You're right, doctor." She slightly enlarged the incision. As the surgery progressed, Emily confirmed her suspicions about the calcification in the coronary artery. It was exactly where she had identified it in the scans. "Dr. Carter, the calcification I identified is right here," she pointed with the scalpel. "We'll need to do a graft." "What calcification?" Dr. Carter stepped closer. "I don't see anything unusual." Emily was stunned. The calcification was clearly visible. "Doctor, it's right here," she insisted. "It's small, but it could cause problems if we don't treat it." "Dr. Johnson, stop inventing complications." Dr. Carter raised his voice. "Focus on the main procedure." Emily took a deep breath. She knew she was right, but she also knew she couldn't directly confront the supervisor during surgery. After 2 hours of meticulous work, Emily reached the most critical part of the procedure, correcting the 4 malformations simultaneously. Her hands moved with millimeter precision as she worked on the tiny heart. Then the unexpected happened. The heart monitor began beeping frantically. Richard's heart had gone into severe arrhythmia. "Dr. Johnson, what's happening?" Dr. Carter shouted. Emily stayed calm, even as her own heart raced. This was exactly the kind of situation she had learned to handle at her mother's clinic, where equipment failed, and she had to improvise solutions. "Arrhythmia is common in this type of procedure," she explained, while delicately adjusting one of the temporary pacemaker wires. "I'll stabilize the rhythm." "This is too dangerous," Dr. Carter stepped closer. "Maybe I should take over from here." "Doctor, please let me finish," Emily asked without taking her eyes off the heart. "I have the situation under control." But Dr. Carter didn't listen. He literally tried to push Emily away from the operating table. "Step aside, Dr. Johnson. I'm taking over the procedure." It was at that moment that something astonishing happened. The nursing team, which had followed the entire progression of the surgery, formed a human barrier around Emily. "Doctor," Nurse Sarah said firmly, "Dr. Johnson is handling the procedure very well. We think it's best not to interrupt now." Dr. Carter was furious, but he couldn't physically push past 4 nurses without causing a scene. Emily seized the moment to apply an innovative technique she had studied. Instead of trying to stabilize the heart with medication, she made a microscopic adjustment to the position of one of the sutures, slightly altering the blood flow. The result was immediate. The monitor stopped beeping, and the heart returned to a normal rhythm. "How did you do that?" Dr. Carter asked, genuinely surprised. "I read about this technique in a Japanese medical journal," Emily explained as she continued working. "It's experimental, but it's proven effective in similar cases." Through the glass of the operating room, Emily saw Lauren pressing her hands to her face, clearly distressed. And beside her, to her great surprise, was Dr. Catherine Williams. Her former mentor had come to the hospital to offer moral support. Catherine gave an encouraging nod when their eyes met. With the heart stabilized, Emily could proceed with the surgery. There were about 40 minutes left to complete the final sutures, but then Dr. Anderson entered the operating room. "Dr. Johnson," he said loudly, "by order of the medical board, you must stop the procedure immediately." Emily froze, her hands in the air, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Doctor, there are only a few sutures left. The patient is stable. There has been a complaint of improper conduct during the surgery. The procedure is being suspended." Emily looked at Dr. Carter, who was trying to hide a satisfied smirk. "Dr. Anderson," Nurse Sarah spoke up, "with all due respect, there has been no improper conduct. Dr. Johnson has performed this surgery flawlessly." "Nurse, it is not your place to comment on medical decisions," Dr. Anderson replied coldly. Then Dr. Catherine's voice echoed through the operating room's sound system. She had requested to use the observation room microphone. "Dr. Anderson, this is Dr. Catherine Williams, former head of cardiac surgery at this institution. I've been observing this surgery for 3 hours, and I can attest that Dr. Johnson is conducting a technically perfect procedure. Any interruption now would unnecessarily endanger the patient's life." Catherine's reputation still carried immense weight in the hospital. Dr. Anderson visibly hesitated. "Dr. Williams, there are protocols that must be followed." "Dr. Anderson," Catherine's voice grew firmer, "if anything happens to this patient because of an unnecessary interruption, I can guarantee you will be held accountable. I have contacts in the press who would be very interested to know why a hospital halted a successful surgery." Dr. Anderson was caught between a rock and a hard place. He knew Catherine wasn't bluffing. "Proceed, Dr. Johnson," he finally said, "but the responsibility is entirely yours." Emily took a deep breath and returned to work. With even steadier hands, she completed the final sutures. Every stitch was placed with absolute precision, knowing the whole world was watching. When she made the last suture and began closing Richard's chest, the heart monitor showed strong, steady beats. The surgery had been a complete success. "Procedure complete," Emily announced. "Patient stable, all corrections successfully performed." The operating room fell silent for a few seconds. Then one of the nurses began to clap. Soon, the entire team joined in. Even Dr. Carter, embarrassed, gave a quiet applause. Through the glass, Emily saw Lauren crying with relief in Dr. Catherine's arms. Her former mentor smiled proudly, knowing she had made the right choice in supporting her. 2 hours later, Richard woke up in the ICU. His first words were to apologize. "Dr. Johnson," he said weakly, "where's that letter I wrote?" Emily handed him the sealed envelope he had left with the hospital's instructions. Richard tore the letter in front of everyone. "I never should have written this. You saved my life. How can I thank you?" "Mr. Thompson, seeing you well is thanks enough." "No, doctor," he insisted. "A promise is a promise. The $500,000 are yours, but I want to do more. I heard your mother's struggling community clinic needs help. I want to invest in it, turn it into a leading center." Emily couldn't hold back her tears. "Mr. Thompson, I can't accept—" "Of course you can," Lauren said, stepping closer to the bed. "Emily, forgive me for doubting you all these years. You've always been the bravest person I know." The two friends embraced, sealing their reconciliation after 12 years. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers so much. Now, back to the story. In the following days, news of the successful surgery spread through Memorial General Hospital. Emily became a minor medical celebrity. Young medical students began seeking her out for advice and mentorship. Dr. Anderson, realizing he had bet on the wrong side, tried to reconnect. "Dr. Johnson, I always knew you had potential. How about we discuss your career here at the hospital?" Emily smiled politely but knew exactly what this meant. "Doctor, I appreciate the interest, but I'd like to focus on my technical development for now." A week after the surgery, Dr. Williams approached Emily. "Emily, how about working together again?" she proposed. "I have a project to create a mentorship program for women surgeons. I need someone skilled to help me develop it." "Dr. Williams, it would be an honor to work with you again." "And there's more," Catherine said with a mysterious smile. "The hospital's board approached me. They want to create a new pediatric cardiac surgery department and suggested your name to lead it." Emily was speechless. At 28, she would be the youngest department head in the hospital's history. "But doctor, I don't have administrative experience." "Emily, you've just proven you have something far more important: technical skill, moral courage, and leadership ability. The rest we'll learn." Meanwhile, with Richard's investment, Margaret's clinic was completely renovated. It gained new equipment, modern exam rooms, and an expanded team. Most importantly, it began offering medical specialties previously unavailable to the underserved community. "Emily," Margaret said at the clinic's grand reopening, "when you were little, you always said you'd become a doctor to help people. Look at what you've accomplished." The ceremony was attended by local officials, press representatives, and dozens of community members. Richard made sure to be there, even as he recovered from surgery. "A month ago," he said in his speech, "I was a prejudiced man who believed women couldn't be surgeons. Today I'm alive, thanks to the skill of an exceptional woman. Let this be an example to all of us of how our biases can blind us to the truth." Dr. Carter, who had lost credibility at the hospital after the investigation into the surgical instrument sabotage, was transferred to another department. She never worked in the operating room again. Nurse Sarah was promoted to nursing supervisor of the surgical center, a recognition of her competence and leadership during critical moments. 6 months after the surgery, Emily received an invitation to present her innovative cardiac stabilization technique at the National Congress of Cardiac Surgery. Her presentation was attended by over 1,000 doctors from across the country. "Colleagues," she said during the lecture, "medicine knows no gender. It knows competence, dedication, and love for human life. Each of us, regardless of being a man or a woman, has the responsibility to save lives to the best of our ability." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Lauren, who had divorced her controlling husband, inspired by her friend's courage, returned to school. At 30, she enrolled in a nursing program, determined to pursue the career she had always wanted but never had the courage to chase. "Emily," she said during a visit to the new clinic, "watching you fight for your dreams made me realize it's never too late to start over." A year after the surgery, Emily was invited to give a lecture at a medical school for freshmen. As she finished her presentation, a young student approached her. "Doctor," the girl said timidly, "I want to be a cardiac surgeon like you, but my parents say it's a profession for men. What do you advise me?" Emily looked into those determined eyes and remembered herself 15 years earlier. "My dear," she held the young woman's hands, "follow your heart. Study hard, be competent, and never let anyone tell you that you can't do something because of your gender. The world needs dedicated doctors, and that has nothing to do with whether we are men or women." 2 years after the famous surgery, Emily oversaw a department of 12 doctors, 6 women and 6 men. She had established scholarships specifically for women interested in cardiac surgery and created an environment where competence was the only criterion for evaluation. Richard recovered completely and became an active lawyer advocating for women's rights in medicine. He founded an organization that funded medical research, led by women, and offered scholarships to underprivileged students. Margaret's clinic had become a benchmark for community care, serving over 1,000 families a month and setting an example for other communities. Margaret, now the administrative director, had fulfilled her lifelong dream. "Daughter," she said to Emily one Sunday afternoon as they watched the activity at the clinic, "you saved much more than a man's life that day. You saved the dreams of so many people." Emily smiled. watching the children playing in the small square in front of the clinic. Some of them said they wanted to be doctors when they grew up. It didn't matter if they were boys or girls, they all had the same determined spark in their eyes. Dr. Anderson, who had tried to block her rise, ended up retiring early. In his place came a younger, more progressive doctor who fully supported diversity in the hospital environment. Dr. Catherine, at 60, had returned to active work as coordinator of the mentorship program. Under her guidance, the number of women entering cardiac surgery residencies had tripled. "Emily," she said during a program meeting, "you did something I never could. You changed the culture of this institution. Today, no medical student here doubts that she can be a surgeon." Emily still operated regularly, but now divided her time between surgical practice, department administration, and teaching. Her residents, men and women, respected her not just for her technical skill, but for her inspiring leadership. During a particularly complex surgery, a young resident commented, "Dr. Emily, how do you manage to stay so calm in such tense situations?" Emily smiled beneath her surgical mask. "Dr. Nathan, I've learned that when we have a clear goal, saving a life, everything else becomes secondary. Prejudice, fear, pressure. None of it matters when there's a life in our hands." 3 years after that life-changing surgery, Emily was invited to speak at the International Congress of Cardiac Surgery in London. She would be the first Brazilian woman to present at the most prestigious event in the field. In her lecture titled "Breaking Barriers: Medical Excellence Beyond Gender," Emily shared her experiences and the lessons she had learned. "Colleagues from around the world," she said, before an audience of over 2,000 surgeons, "medicine advances when we make room for all talents, regardless of background, gender, or social status. Every life we save is the result, not just of our individual skills, but of the richness of diversity within our teams." The lecture was considered a milestone in the history of global cardiac surgery and led to invitations to create similar programs in various countries. Lauren, now a certified nurse, worked at her Aunt Margaret's community clinic. She had found her calling caring for underprivileged children and their families. "Emily," she said one afternoon, "I never imagined I'd be this happy working. Thank you for inspiring me to follow my own path." The mentorship program created by Dr. Catherine and Emily had expanded to other medical specialties. Young female doctors from across the United States sought guidance and support for their careers. One of the mentees, Dr. Jasmine Robinson, from a humble family in rural Alabama, became the first black woman to lead a neurosurgery department in the country. "Dr. Emily," she said during a video call, "your story gave me the courage to never give up, even when everyone said I wouldn't make it." The impact of Emily's work reached the federal government. She was invited to join a National Health Policy Commission, becoming the youngest member in its history. During one meeting, she presented a project to establish cardiac surgery training centers in underserved regions of the country. The project was approved and received funding of $100 million. "Representatives and senators," she said during the presentation, "we cannot accept that people have less chance of survival simply because they were born far from major urban centers. Quality medicine must reach all Americans." At Memorial General Hospital, a bronze plaque was installed at the entrance of the Pediatric Cardiac Surgery Department, Dr. Emily Johnson Department, where competence overcomes any prejudice. Every year, on the anniversary of her first complex surgery, Emily and her team organized an event to celebrate the advances in pediatric cardiac medicine. The gathering brought together doctors, nurses, patients' parents, and the wider community. Richard never missed the event. At 58, he had fully recovered and had become a proud father to Lauren. "Dr. Emily," he said during the third anniversary, "sometimes I think about the prejudiced man I used to be. You didn't just save my life, you made me a better person." The community clinic had grown into a medical complex with 3 buildings. In addition to basic health services, it offered specialties like cardiology, pediatrics, gynecology, and even minor surgeries. Margaret, now 57, was recognized as one of the leading community figures in Chicago's South area. She had received numerous honors for her social work. "Emily," she said one morning, "remember when you were little and played doctor with your dolls? You said when you grew up you'd build a hospital to take care of everyone for free. Look at what you've accomplished. The innovative technique developed by Emily during that first complex surgery had been documented and published in international medical journals. Surgeons from various countries had adopted the procedure, saving hundreds of lives. A Japanese colleague, Dr. Hideo Nakamura, came to the United States specifically to learn the technique. "Dr. Johnson," he said through a translator, "your contribution to global cardiac surgery is extraordinary. In Japan, we call your technique the American Miracle." During an international online conference, Emily was asked about the challenges women face in medicine. "Colleagues," she replied, "the challenges exist and they are real. But I've learned that the best way to combat prejudice is through professional excellence. When we prove our competence repeatedly, we break barriers that once seemed impossible." At 31, Emily had become a world-renowned figure in pediatric cardiac surgery. She received invitations to lecture at universities worldwide and had mentored over 50 residents. But her greatest pride remained her work at the community clinic. Every Friday, no matter her schedule, she set aside half a day to treat underprivileged children. "Dr. Johnson," a young resident once asked, "why do you still work in the South area? With all your experience, you could focus solely on complex cases." Emily smiled, remembering her mother's words years earlier. "Dr. Jessica, medicine isn't just about surgical skill, it's about serving people, especially those who need it most. If I forget that, I lose the very reason I chose this profession." The scholarship program Richard Thompson had created had benefited more than 200 medical students. Many had already graduated and pursued careers in specialties once dominated by men. One recipient, Tiffany Brooks, the daughter of a hospital janitor, became a reconstructive plastic surgery resident. "Mr. Thompson," she said during a graduation ceremony, "you changed my life. Not just with the scholarship money, but with the message that we can overcome any obstacle." Catherine, now 62, had written a book about her career and the evolution of women in medicine. The book became a bestseller and was adopted in medical courses across the country. "Emily," she said at the launch, "you represent everything I dreamed of for future generations of female doctors, skilled, courageous, and above all, compassionate." Each year, the number of women entering cardiac surgery residency programs grew. What was once an almost exclusively male specialty now approached gender parity. Dr. Brandon Wilson, the resident who had warned Emily about Richard's calcification, became a respected cardiac surgeon. He always credited part of his success to the leadership and ethics Emily had demonstrated. "Dr. Johnson," he said during a surgery they performed together, "you taught me that being a doctor is far more than mastering techniques. It's having the courage to stand for what's right, even when everyone is against you." 5 years after that life-changing surgery, Emily was invited to be the keynote speaker at her alma mater's medical school graduation. "Future colleagues," she said before a class of 200 graduates, "you're entering a profession that can change lives, not just your patients' lives, but your own, and the lives of people you may never even realize you've touched." Among the graduates were 12 students who had been recipients of Richard's scholarships. 6 were women planning to pursue careers in surgical specialties. "Dr. Emily," one of them approached after the ceremony, "you are our inspiration. We know that if we can be half the doctor you are, we'll make a difference in the world." The community clinic had become a research center for preventive and community medicine. Medical students from various universities interned there, learning about compassionate and accessible care. Margaret had been invited to give lectures on community health management at national conferences. At 59, she had become a leading voice on the subject. "Emily," she said one quiet afternoon, "when you saved Mr. Richard's life, you also saved many others we couldn't have imagined. Every child we treat here is a reflection of that day." Lauren, now 32, had remarried, this time to a pediatrician she met at the clinic. Together, they decided to adopt 2 orphaned children. "Emily," she said during the baptism of one of their daughters, "I want you to be their godmother. I want them to grow up knowing they can be anything they dream of." The pediatric cardiac surgery department at Memorial General Hospital had become the largest referral center in Latin America. Patients came from across the continent to be operated on by Emily and her team. But what made Emily proudest was the work environment she had created. There was no longer any distinction between male and female doctors, only competence and dedication to patients mattered. "Dr. Emily," said Dr. Thomas, one of the senior surgeons in the department, "I've worked in many hospitals, but I've never seen an environment as respectful and productive as this. You've created something special here." During an interview for an international medical journal, Emily was asked about her future plans. Reporter: "My greatest dream is to see a world where no child dies from lack of access to quality cardiac surgery. We have the technology and the knowledge. Now, we need the political and social will to make it happen." The foundation Richard created had expanded its work. Beyond funding research and scholarships, it now built clinics in underserved communities across the country. "Emily," Richard said during the opening of the 10th clinic funded by the foundation, "that day in the operating room changed my life forever. Now I want our story to change the lives of many others." The mentorship program had trained over 300 women doctors in various specialties. Many now held leadership positions in hospitals nationwide, fostering more inclusive and respectful environments. One mentee, Dr. Rachel Cooper, became the first woman to lead a cardiac surgery department at a federal university. "Dr. Emily," she said during her inauguration, "your example taught me that we can be firm without losing our humanity, competent without losing humility." At 33, Emily received the Physician of the Year award from the World Association of Cardiac Surgery, the first time an American had been honored. In her acceptance speech, she spoke about the importance of diversity in medicine. "Colleagues from around the world," she said, "medicine advances when we open our minds and hearts to different perspectives. Every surgeon, regardless of gender, background, or social status, brings unique contributions to our profession." The technique Emily developed had been refined over the years. What began as an improvisation during an emergency surgery was now taught in medical schools worldwide. Dr. Anthony Bennett, a renowned English surgeon, came to the United States to meet Emily in person. "Dr. Johnson," he said in English, "your contribution to cardiac surgery is immeasurable. You've saved thousands of lives around the world." Emily replied humbly, "Dr. Bennett, medicine is a collective effort. My small contribution was only possible thanks to the work of thousands of colleagues who came before me." The community clinic had transformed into a full-fledged health campus. Beyond medical services, it offered technical health courses, prevention programs, and even a small school for the staff's children. "Emily," said Margaret, now the director of the complex, "sometimes I stop to look at all this and can't believe it. It started with a borrowed room and 2 used pieces of equipment. Look what it's become." Emily's work had inspired changes in public health policies. The Department of Health created a national program to encourage women to enter traditionally male-dominated medical specialties. "Dr. Johnson," said the Secretary of Health during a meeting, "your achievements proved the country was wasting half its medical potential. Now we want to fix that." Lauren, now a pediatric nurse, coordinated children's care at the community clinic. Her 2 adopted daughters, Emma and Olivia, were 6 and 8 years old and dreamed of becoming doctors like Aunt Emily. "Mommy," little Emma said, "when I grow up, I'll operate on people's hearts like Aunt Emily does." "Of course you will, sweetheart," Lauren replied. "You can be anything you want." During a particularly difficult surgery, Emily remembered that day 6 years earlier when she first entered the operating room to operate on Richard. How many lives had changed since then? How many prejudices had been shattered? How many dreams had come true? "Dr. Johnson," one of the residents said, "you seem thoughtful today." "I'm just remembering how it all began, Dr. Ashley. Sometimes it's important to look back to understand how far we've come." The pediatric cardiac surgery department had become a global reference, not just for its technical quality, but for its inclusive and respectful management model. Delegations from various countries came to learn from the American experience. "Dr. Johnson," a French visitor asked, "what's the secret to your department's success?" "Mr. Laurent," Emily replied, "the secret is simple. We treat everyone with respect and focus on what truly matters, saving lives. When you remove prejudices and create an environment of trust, people give their best. Catherine, now 64, had decided to retire for good. At her farewell party, she gave an emotional speech. "Emily," she said, "when you were my student, I saw in your eyes the same determination I had when I started. But you achieved something I never could. You changed not just your own reality, but that of an entire generation of women doctors." Richards Foundation had expanded internationally. Clinics funded by the organization now operated in 5 Latin American countries, following the model developed by Emily and Margaret. "Emily," Richards said during a video conference with all the clinics, "our story proved that when we overcome our prejudices, we can create extraordinary things. Every life saved in these clinics is a result of that day you had the courage to operate on me." Catherine's book about women in medicine had been translated into 15 languages. Emily wrote the preface for the international edition, reflecting on the progress made and the challenges that remained. "Medicine knows no gender, only calling," Emily wrote. "Every professional who chooses to dedicate their life to saving others deserves respect and equal opportunities, regardless of whether they are a man or a woman." At 34, Emily was elected president of the American Society of Pediatric Cardiac Surgery, becoming the youngest person and the first woman to hold the position. In her inauguration speech, she announced the creation of a national program to train pediatric cardiac surgeons in underserved regions of the country. "Colleagues," she said, "we cannot accept that children have less chance of survival simply because they were born far from major urban centers. Let's bring quality pediatric cardiac surgery to every corner of the United States." The community clinic had become a case study in universities worldwide. The model of compassionate and efficient care developed there was being replicated in many countries. Margaret, now internationally recognized as an expert in community health management, received invitations to consult on public health projects around the world. "Emily," she said one Saturday afternoon as they watched children playing in the clinic's courtyard, "do you remember when it was just the 2 of us in a borrowed room? Look at how many lives we've touched." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of perseverance and courage. Do you believe Emily made the right decision by accepting that challenge? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.